Hi everyone, thank you for coming to this talk about independent cultural journalism versus the far right. Thank you first to the Paris Electronic Week for welcoming this talk. I'm Manon. I work for the Reset Network, which is a network of independent cultural and media structures in Europe. And getting into it, basically the Reset Network documents the situation of independent cultural players in Europe. And we notably released the Atlas of Independent Culture and Media back in April on various topics. And one of them is resisting throughout adversity situation. And one of them is obviously how do you act as a cultural player and a journalist in times of far-right domination in different countries. We all know that the European political scene is quite pressured right now and unstable, with the far-right rising all over Europe, from Italy to Slovakia to France, Belgium as well, in different ways. There are some countries such as Italy and Slovakia where the far-right is well established with repressive laws such as the anti-rape law in Italy, in Hungary, the anti-LGBTQIA plus law, and a lot of different events in Slovakia that we will touch on afterwards as well. And this far right is basically raising both in private and public figures, and the overall narrative is dominated by anti-immigrant, anti-culture, and kind of targeting the different and the independent. And one easy target of it all is, of course, culture and media, which is often used as propaganda. I'm going to make it propaganda tools. Basically, the only kind of resistance there is once the general narrative is dominated by the far right is independence, and independence is a way to keep another narrative going. And so, that's the topic of today that we will discuss with our very concerned speakers. So I have Damir Ivic on my left from Soundwall in Milan.
Hello, you all. It's cool to be here. It's fun. And we're going to have fun with this panel.
Hopefully, yeah. I have Ivana Rumanova from Slovakia. She's an independent journalist and from the Open Culture platform. Yes, hello. Thanks for having me here. And Matteo Vignier, who is a freelance journalist from France, but based in Belgium.
Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here and very happy also to bring all this information about France, but also about Belgium, because it's very similar, but with slight nuances that are also interesting to analyze, to see what's going to happen.
Yeah. And let's get right into it. To start with, I would like, so that we all can on the same page and on the same base, to start with some bit of context. So I'll give each of you all like a few minutes, like 10 minutes or something, to kind of expose what is going on in your country, what's the situation for independent journalism in the far right context. So whoever wants to start, the floor is yours.
Well, I can start. Because I'm coming from Italy, and hey, we are the land that gave you Berlusconi for more than 20 years. We were the experiment number one, where a TV owner, his owner was of Mondadori, which is like the greatest publishing firm in Italy, came in charge and became the prime minister. And he's also super wealthy. So we all thought that Berlusconi was a nice nightmare that could occur to Italy. And obviously, when you think that, what comes next is even worse. What is happening now is that Berlusconi has died. Rest in peace, maybe. Then we had several governments. One was run by Matteo Salvini, which is, kindly said, a sort of piece of shit, I would say. And I hope that this thing is recorded, because he's really a populist. Everything is propaganda when it's about him, and that kind of thing. He didn't last that long. We had an in-between thing with Mario Draghi, so the technicians came into power, and then finally we had the elections. And what happened is that for the very first time, the far-right party that used to have something like 5%, 8%, 7% suddenly got almost 30%. And then they won, and now they're in power. And the fun begins, because they've never been in charge of the government. They never had the top positions within the media field, for instance. And they're hungry. They're damn hungry. They want everything. They want to demonstrate that now that they're in charge, everything is changing. And it's changing the way they want. And the way they want is something that we never had so far. So Italy is in a very interesting moment of history. It's a sort of momentum. It could be really, really dangerous. It could be really, really a problem. What I feel and what I hope is the fact that they're idiots enough. They're not capable enough to do what they want to do, because they focus on some stupid things that sound important to them, but they lose the essence. And when they want to try to fight something or to put their mark on something, they always fuck it up. For instance, there was a huge thing against rapes in Italy. The very first thing that this new government did when they came into power was a law against rapes. Well, with the Mariani thing, you know very well. In France, you're quite skilled with that thing. When they tried to do it, it was so, so blatant that they completely did it wrong. I mean, these new laws said that if you participate to a rape, you can be sentenced up to 6 years in jail, which is stupid. If you're messing with mafia, with the local mafia, which is one of the worst things that can happen in Italy, you can be sentenced to 3 years of jail. How's that? How's that possible? So, I mean, trying to show that they're strong, they can do everything, and now everything is changing, they fucked it up. And that's what I hope that it's going to succeed in the next weeks, months, years, because I feel they're going to stay here at least for 3 years more. So that's the context. It's scary and funny at the same time.
Thank you.
That's so Italian.
And what's, just to touch on the context in Italy as well, what's the context within the media sphere?
The media sphere, well, the mainstream media, they've been always linked to the power. They do what the power, not what the power wants, but what the power likes. And now they're trying to adapt. Not completely, because these new guys at the government, they're new. So the major forces, the big powers, still don't know what to expect from them. So there's a sort of endorsement, but it's really, let's see. So the mainstream media is quite keen to go to that direction, but not sure yet. And the independent media sphere is struggling, as always, as it has always been. Because being independent in Italy means that you're not connected with whatever means being in charge, whatever means having powers. So we used to be useless, apparently useless, but we're not.
Thank you, Damir. And who of you wants to go next? Take a bit
Okay, I can go on. To put it short, we are screwed up, and we will be screwed up for at least 3 more years, if not more. We had elections just 1 year ago, exactly 30 of September 2023. And since then, many things happened. So if I talk too long, just interrupt me, please.
No worries.
So as the result of this election, Slovak National Party got into the parliament with only some 5.6% of votes. So they almost didn't manage, but in the end they did. What I should stress maybe is that I don't read their politics as far-right, it's rather alt-right. The illustration of this is that the only figure from the original Slovak National Party, which used to be very conservative, traditionalist, Christian, pro-life party, which I don't say is right, but they use different strategies and different techniques. The only person left from this party is the leader of the party. And to get into the parliament, he got alliances with all sorts of bizarre figures and bizarre initiatives from alt-right scene, and it worked, and they got into parliament thanks to the support of this alt-right scene. The Minister of Culture herself, she comes from this alt-right media scene. She used to be a moderator for one commercial channel TV, but she got fired in 2016, I think, because of anti-migrant status she shared on her Facebook page. And then she opened her career on an alt-right channel, and from there she got directly to be the Minister of Culture of Slovakia. So I'm stressing this just to say that the strategies and the techniques of executing power in the Ministry of Culture are different, or are based on this alt-right media scene.
Yeah, maybe you can say a bit about the context within the cultural sphere. Like, since the minister came to power, it has shaken up.
As I said, they got only 5.6% of votes, so they got the ministries that no one really cared for, which means Ministry of Culture and Ministry of Environment. But this was the case even before. And since September till December till Christmas, they were trying to orientate themselves in the new situation. There were a coalition agreements and negotiations going on, but there were already some hints of what their policy will be like. Like, Minister of Culture, she published on the official Facebook page of Minister of Culture a sort of public survey asking people to vote if they would prefer to finance what she calls a queer festival for children, or rather the reconstruction of the roof of Slovak Philharmonic building. Really complete nonsense. And she would say that LGBTE plus projects won't receive any more penny from the public fundings. And she attacked concrete artists and censored several art shows, etc., etc. So in January, we thought, like, this is already enough. We published a petition asking her to resign. And at first we thought, okay, this will be some sort of like a self-therapy movement just to do something. And we expected to have few hundreds of signatures and then we move on. But it grew very quickly. And in less than 1 month, we collected 200,000 signatures, which for the context of Slovakia is really big thing. But the only response we got is that the Ministry of Culture presented a complaint filed a complaint at the Prosecutor General Office for the suspicion of sabotage and hacking other people's computers and nonsense like this. So these are the techniques of alt-right scenes I was mentioning before. But the important result of this petition was that this initiative, Open Culture, formed. It put together the actors from all the cultural spheres and sectors in all Slovakia. And I think it's super important because the will to organize was not at all evident in Slovakia even 1 year before. There was a figure of artist as this individual genius who should be clever enough and skillful enough to survive without having to organize. And organization and trade unions were seen as some leftovers of the former regime, and no one really wanted to deal with it. But now it's changed really, really radically, so I think this is important. And it was important to organize because the further steps of Ministry of Culture got even more brutal and more radical. A friend of mine called it like Orban on speed, and I think this is very precise. So what happened, to sum up? They were using two basic principles, legislation changes and then personal changes and dismissing of main representatives of institutions. So they changed the law about museums and galleries, the law about the public broadcasting media, and the law about art fund and audiovisual fund, which are the two main organisms for redistribution of money in the sector of independent culture. And the aim of these legislation changes, without going into much of the details, is clearly to get ideological control and to be able to realize economic censorship in the sphere of independent culture.
Yeah, we're going to get to it afterwards, but yeah, thank you very much, Ivana. Matteo, do you want to round up this context space?
Yeah, of course. So, well, as you might know, in France, the situation is very problematic lately. We had anticipated elections when the president dissolved the parliament, and we thought that we would end up having more clarity over the situation of the politics in France. And we end up having the national rally that, even though they're not in power, the prime minister has to consult them to be sure that they're not going to be censored, their government. And it's something that is crazy because you end up having like this far-right party that no one wanted to negotiate with that ends up having the power over the whole government. And you can see it also how they are perceived in the media, how the whole narrative have shifted completely towards the right in France. All parties end up having to talk about nationalism, about immigration, about the status of the EU, which in general were like topics that were only mentioned by far right. And you have like this crisis as well because people start distrusting mainstream media, as they call it, because far right has been like bombarding with this kind of messages, being like, these elites are mastering the narrative and you don't have to believe them. But what is very ironical is that the elites, after all, are far right. Far right is led by a family of French bourgeois. The medias that also are controlled by far right are controlled by people who have way too much power in the media landscape. Which at the end creates a little bit of a crisis in France of the media because you don't really know where to listen and who to listen anymore. And that's why I think that independent journalism has a chance to play a big role, but we have to resist and to empower ourselves again with all the difficulties that exist financially in terms of reach and everything. And I think that the situation in Belgium is even more complicated because the country is split in two and there's like two complete different cultures in both sides in terms of language, but also in terms of the relationship that they have with far right. In the French-speaking side, for example, far right doesn't exist almost. The only parties that exist have like 0.1%, and all this because of a measure that is called cordon sanitaire, where it's forbidden to invite far right on TV, to debate with far right, to have them in the same newspapers as more traditional parties. But on the other side of the country, it's almost more than 40% of the voters that vote for far right, and far right takes different representations. It's not only like the evil racist far right, but it will also be the one that will fight for the independence of Flanders, for example. And there's lots of people who will end up voting for them, even though they don't agree on the rest of the program. They will just want their land to be recognized as independent, and which is very complicated after to deal with when we're talking about media, because on the French-speaking side, they are trying still to resist, but the general narrative, as in France, has been shifting towards more subjects like nationalism, like anti-immigration. So it's very difficult to navigate throughout all this.
Thank you. Thank you to the three of you for this context. So now that we kind of touched on what is the situation and kind of what are the dynamics that came in place with the far-right growing or even rising to the power, I guess it's important to get to how do we resist to these dynamics, right? And I feel like there are several aspects that we need to resist towards. And the first one is obviously the ideological pressure and the use of their ideas in the general narrative. And so the first question I would have is that how would you say that each of you as independent journalists and cultural workers generally, you have been affected by the far right, and how have you responded to this affection?
Let's start from the last question, how to respond. Probably Italy is something different compared to Belgium or to Slovakia, or not. I don't know, but I can say that maybe the best thing to do is to resist, obviously, but to resist with some sense of humor. Because if you try to fight them, if you go strong against them, they love to show themselves as victims. They do love that, because they feel that they've been victims all the way up from the Second World War, because obviously we get rid of the fascist party, thanks God, and they were completely out of power for so many years. So they keep saying that they were victims, they were out of the democratic field. So if you confront them harshly, they can sing that song, oh, we're victims, so you're not democratic. Now that finally we are in charge, you were in charge for so many years, and we were not, actually, because it was, in Italy, it was the Democrazia Cristiana, the Catholic Party, that was mostly in charge after the Second World War. So the things are blurred in a way, and I can tell you that confronting them is fine, but you have to be clever. Because if you put it, if you act with force, if you're really against them, if you write harshly against them, they love it. That's what they want. So it's like being a judoka. You have to use the force of your opponent to win. You have to be quite smart. So that is the answer to your last question. How do I personally, or how do my colleagues react to all these? It's hard to tell because everyone is different, every media is different. And once again, if we were independent media, we were already used to be a sort of ideological freelancers. So we were used to surf against the difficulties. So everyone is finding his own path and his own voice, his or her, obviously. So let's see, we're not affected that much because we were in danger before, because we had no means, we were not wealthy, we had no resources, and at the moment, not much has changed. So life goes on.
Could I ask a developing question? Like, how can you mobilize humor or irony if what they propose is already like extremely absurd? To give you an idea, like the General Secretary of Ministry of Culture came up with an idea that the first thing ministry should do is to intronize Jesus Christ as the King of Slovakia. Like, come on, how can you beat this?
That is why our situation is different. And I don't envy you, because in our country, the far right is trying to disguise as a great conservative party. It's not an alt-right thing. The alt-right is still 0.5%, 1%, 0.7%. That's the far, far, far right. But the Fratelli d'Italia party, Giorgia Meloni and stuff, now they're acting like the new Democrazia Cristiana. They're invoking the Catholic rules and the Catholic values, but they're not as weirdos and as crazy and as probably dangerous as in your country. That's my feeling. So I know it's easy for me to say, okay, let's use the irony. Let's have fun with them. This applies to Italy. I fear it's not applying to some other countries.
But to rebound on what Ivana was saying, like, how do you concretely in your work as a journalist use this irony? Like, how do you, like, is it slight references in some articles? Like, how do you use this irony?
I don't know. Headlines. When I wrote a quite popular thing about the anti-rave law, the headline I chose was, it's not that they're fascists, they're idiots. And it worked. Because if you're using a headline that's like, hey, the fascist is coming, we're in danger, that wouldn't work. Really, that wouldn't work. And trying to underline the fact that they're not skilled as decision makers, these could be the key, at least for us, because we're not that much in danger as other countries are.
So he's using irony. What's your technique to respond to the ideological discourse that is being faced up?
Maybe there are two levels of the question, the practical one and the narrative or ideological one. The practical one, what really terrifies me is that they proceeded in accordance with law so far. Like, what they did was legal. So it made us realize how fragile is the execution of democratic power, of to which extent you take into consideration that people would not cross certain lines just because they could. But if they're in that position and they do it, you don't have much possibilities to fight against. Like we mobilized all the tools that we had. We protested. We were writing together with lawyers like these comments when the new legislation is being approved. Nothing worked. Like there are good strategies. They would say, okay, you can protest. It's your democratic tool, but we won't let the street decide on our politics. So this is really terrifying. So maybe the solution would be to think of some model of self-governance for culture as it is being present in academia or municipalities, so that it would be much more difficult for people in power, whatever party or like ideological positioning they have, to get over the resort of culture. The second thing would be to really teach workers and employees about their rights. Because it really happens very often that they would call someone to a closed room and they would shout on him, on her, telling like, if you don't sign the resignation, you won't leave the room and stuff like that. And people now it seems like no one would really accept it, but they are so scared that they would do it. So really educate employees about their rights and organize. And on the level of narrative or ideology, I think what is at the core of what we have to fight is this polarization of people, because what they are using is to separate the people into what they call liberal, perverted, pro-Western tracers, what in contrast to traditional, pure Slovak national people. But in a very self-critical way, we must admit that this sort of polarization is being present in arts and culture as well, separating people into progressive and backwarded. This is the same polarization, just in a negative version. So this is the core of what we have to fight, and try to find the language of how to speak to the voters of these parties, saying it's not only about culture. Culture is a part of commons that should be shared. It's not the luxury goods that should be affordable only to those who can pay for it. Together with the healthcare system, together with decent education, these are the most important pillars of the democracy, and we should together fight for it. We are on the same line of this fight.
And to the reaction that has been, you've talked that you work with lawyers to write some notes, etc. How was the independent media sector and independent journalists such as yourself, for example, what was their role into this response to the whole changes that came in the legal form that it took?
It's very critical, of course, but it changed nothing. They passed the laws, it's already in the legislation, so there have been many critical reports, and it's quite loud, they give us a lot of space, and it helps, really, in contrast, which is a shame, towards the fights they are doing in the resort of environment. It's not so visible, which is really a pity. So we think of creating alliances with them. But the media helped, or were trying to give us space and visibility, but it didn't change a thing.
What about you, Matteo? How do you feel you've been affected as a journalist by these far-right narratives, both in Belgium or in France, but you're working in Belgium?
For me, I really think that you can read about it a lot. You can read in the way where how journalism has shifted and how people explain and present things that are happening, how culture is presented as well. And I think, as you were saying, reclaiming this national narrative that, for example, for France and for Belgium, it's countries that are very multicultural, and it's really the richness of the country and also of the cultural sector. And just to say an example, I was interviewing this artist called Ailey, who does this kind of jazzy, groovy electronica, and she was saying that it affects her a lot to see that media now talk about her work as a Japanese artist, but she was born in Belgium. She just has double nationality, and just to sell more or to go in the direction of these people who see individuals as foreigners or as people that don't share the same national identity as themselves. This hurt me as well, and I was thinking how do we formulate it to avoid spreading this kind of violence as well? And she told me the best way to say it is, instead of saying, for example, like just half Belgian and half Japanese, just double Belgian and double Japanese, you know? And this, it was really like, in a way that yourself also you write, you can change the narrative and, or at least like making it sound like the way you want it to be, you know? And I think that this is one way, and one other way is to orientate your subjects and your angles towards arts that is doing resistance as well. Like, for example, when we see the coverage of the conflicts that are happening in the Middle East, I was very surprised, for example, that medias are not talking about artists that are like protesting, you know? Like in Belgium, for example, you talk about facts, you talk about like numbers, you talk about like geopolitics, but in terms of artists, you don't really like go deep in what is the representation of this. And yet, when I dig a little bit deeper into like more independent media, I hear about an artist that I thought that everyone will mention, which is Muslim Ghost, you know? And it was for me a shock that no big media or mainstream media even makes a reference to this. So I think that choosing what you're talking about and how you talk about it is already a weapon to counter that. And for another example that goes on the other way as well, like lately I heard a podcast about an artist that runs a label. I'm not going to talk about his name, even though like it's this label from Long Island, who did this podcast about American politics, who was praising Donald Trump and talking about like very radically about migration, talking really shit about it, you know? And I was like, right after I called all my editors and said like, if there's an article where I mention this guy, can you at least like erase his name or try to change the way it's formulated so he's not glorified anymore? Because it was in the past where I wrote these kind of articles, and now I don't want my name to be associated to that and to promote this kind of thing. So I think that the way you promote art can also be a form of resistance, the art that you choose to promote.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are different ways. I mean, you use irony within what you write to kind of make your message go through, but also exactly just going to the source of it, the topic that you choose, the people that you choose to put in front of your piece is obviously something that kind of strives to convey the very racist. And
the double thing is a perfect example, double instead of half. I feel one thing, sometimes we tend to treat culture as a value, which actually this is what it is. But we miss maybe the other half. The half is that culture helps make your life better. It's not just the value itself. Because the way left wing has been using arts and culture in Italy in the last decades, it turned it into a sort of status symbol. Art is something for well-educated people. Art is something for well-behaving people, for rich people, for wealthy people, for stylish people. It's not only that. We miss the fact that art helps you live better. And all the people that vote the far right, that are angry against the society, against immigration, against gays and whatever, they're just angry. They need something that makes them feel better. And arts and culture could be the answer. And we're missing that point. I feel we're missing that point. We're stuck to the fact that culture it's a good thing. It's not only the good thing, it's the thing that makes you feel good, which is slightly different.
And as maybe the left has used culture to promote its own value, the far right isn't right now like using these tools of making culture just to value, but seeing that it's the values that you bear in the beginning that you can get through culture. And that's how it changes the thing, you know?
Oh, they're using culture as something to conquer. They just want the thing. They want the powers. They want to be at the top of the cinema festival in Venice. They want to be at the top of the TV. And this is their focus. They don't even think about content. I mean, sometimes they drop some stupid content, words that resemble partially the fascist era, but it's a sort of game. They just think about the power. And here is our chance, because we know how to deal with content. We're cultured people. We know, at the same time, we know how to have fun. Let's transmit that. Let's transmit the fact that culture is not an elitist thing, because I feel that in the last decades, that was the shift that was occurring.
But one thing that I feel can be kind of a barrier, let's say, into this, you were talking about like public media in Europe, but also talking about the law from public media in Slovakia. One really like significant barrier for independent media is funding, right? And I feel that in far-right countries, one tool that they have used to kind of try and stop independent culture and alternative culture to thrive is budget cuts. And these budget cuts or budget taking over other kind of culture, or taking over, for example, putting all funding for culture and media to the public broadcast that is already given to the far-right narrative, has affected independent journalists. So first question, very concrete, have you been affected by budget cuts in your own countries?
Yes, but it could be an opportunity. Because if you focus on financing, you make them win. Because you're saying that money is the most important thing, that means are the most important things. And it's not, because ideas could be stronger than money. Obviously, it would be great to have both. We all know that.
And to operate, you also need sometimes...
Yeah, sure.
You can find other streams of funding, but
I mean,
the moment it changes can be a real hard cut.
Let them get the fundings. They're going to take them anyways, because now they're in power. Let them take the fundings, and the cultural output of these things would be awful. For instance, once that they're in power, they want to demonstrate that they're releasing great cultural events. So they spent 350,000 euros to organize 3 concerts of an orchestra that was playing Vincenzo Bellini. These 3 concerts altogether sold 83 tickets. They spent 350,000 euros to sell 83 tickets. And that's it. This is when you see that money is not everything. You can complain about the fact that, oh, they got the money, we didn't get the money, but let's see how they use it.
No, for sure. But still, maybe all this money that has been used to sell 83 tickets has, be taken from an independent initiative that was...
Sure.
Personally,
But that's the next step.
But
if you fight just for the money, I guess maybe you're losing the focus that we need now, not later, not before, but now. There's a cultural thing, there's a cultural war that we need to fight, but it has to be smart. And it hasn't, you don't have to have it focused on money, otherwise it's their narrative.
Yeah. What do you think about this? How is the state of cultural funding in Slovakia, for example?
The impacts we will only see next year. So far, they're intentionally trying to make, for example, this art council, that was the main mechanism of redistribution of public money into the sphere of independent culture. So they change the law in such a way that it's not the expert commissions who decide on distribution of money, but it's a board where the majority of members is nominated directly by Minister of Culture. So they have this censorship organ. And plus... twice already it happened that they couldn't make any decision because they instructed the members that they nominated themselves not to participate. So they are really trying to decompose the system at all. So this is so far what we know, but it's very unlikely that I would get any research stipendium in the 3 upcoming years. So I don't count with it personally. But it's not only about me, it's about people working in regional libraries, people working for heritage protection, people working or doing programs in folklore groups. In this sense, I wouldn't agree with you. For me, it's important to mobilize and to stress the materialist aspects of this fight. is not only about ideology. And personally, honestly, I think the motivation of Slovak National Party is not ideological. They just use it as a pretext. They want to extract the result as much as they can during the upcoming years, meaning creating some public-private partnerships in the resorts of cultural heritage, evaluating the private collections, using the National Gallery, etc., etc. Their intentions are purely economical, so why should we resign on these arguments? Art is work, and I would like to stress it, and I think this is the way how to communicate our topics and our fight to a wider public for whom the liberty or freedom of expression might not be that important.
You know, it's a matter of country because I'm half Serbian. My mother comes from Belgrade, and what you said would apply perfectly to Serbia. So I feel that once again the situation in Italy is quite different. That's the point. So my strategy is it applies to the Italian situation. What you're saying and your strategy, I think it's a very necessary thing for the Eastern European countries. In Italy, culture, the cultural environment has always been used to the vital one, was always used to count on their very own means. The fundings, we know we're not gonna get fundings. We know that. So whatever. We know that the fundings are going to go to the classical music, not to pop music, not to electronic music. We know that in Italy, Teatro La Scala itself, that it's super rich, super wealthy. It's got so many private fundings, and they get from the state 70 million euros a year. And the whole pop, rock, electronic music sector, the whole sector gets 2 millions a year. We know that. We're used to that. So that is why our situation is different. But it's not that I'm against what you were saying. I totally agree with you because I feel, I think that I understand, I feel you. I think that I understand what's going on there. So you are right. But still the situation in a country like Italy, it's slightly different.
Maybe I think that the similar thing is that this pact between public and private, which is starting in Slovakia right now, which is, for example, really much going on in Hungary, for example, where Orban using the parallel, Orban has already kind of sold or given spots to his friends within private sector to kind of flood public funds within the private sector. I think in Italy, it's just something that has been going on before. You were talking about Berlusconi. It's just that it's already so rooted that now it's
even before Berlusconi.
Yeah,
I mean this difference between Teatro La Scala and the rest of the world. That's not a far right problem. It has always been a problem.
Though it's getting worse with the far right. You were talking about funding of some kind of culture, for example, classical music, which is really good, but the far right is using the whole rich and wealthy aspect of classical music and classical culture and funding it even more. I feel like in Italy, even if the dynamic precedes, they're getting deeper and deeper with the far right.
But be a judoka. Now they're getting more funds, but the output is shit. And that's good news.
And that's maybe your role as a journalist to,
it's a way to
point it out,
to make a shift, to change the situation.
What about in France and Belgium? Because I mean, as a French cultural worker as well, I know that in various regions, for example, as in the Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes region, we have a president of the region which is quite conservative, and he has taken away funding from independent theaters, for example, and it's kind of a thread that is hanging above us all the time. So how do you feel these budget cuts and funding?
On a journalistic point of view, I've been doing this for more than 10 years, and the economic situation is still the same. There's not much money for us and everything, but I think, as you say, it impacts what we're going to talk about. And I have a more clear example of this. If we talk about Belgium, for example, I used to live in the city of Antwerp that has been governed for already 7 or 8 years by far right. And I used to talk a lot about nightlife, for example. Antwerp used to be like the crazy city. There used to be like many very cool clubs. People were driving from Brussels to go to Antwerp. People were coming from France, from the Netherlands and everything. And now, honestly, like there's less than 3 good clubs in Antwerp. And all this because of this decision of far right to invest the money and to give the authorizations as well to things that will make the Flemish culture shine, and not electronic music that is more international, that is more sharing more humanistic values. So the problem is that when you are a journalist and you want to report about what's happening in your city, you don't have anything anymore to talk about, because the only events that will be, for example, like talking about electronic music from a close perspective will be something that will be organized in the port of Antwerp or in the central station. Things that, in terms of, it's just entertainment, is not culture anymore. It's not like there's not added value. There's nothing that is really exciting to talk about. So you end up lacking subjects, and it's not necessarily because you don't have the fundings, because I never had them, for example, but like I don't have anything anymore to talk about when I want to talk about the local scene. And that's the main danger, because with no local scene, you will have no evolution of the sector anymore. And it's just going down the hill. It's cascading all the time towards like something that will be mainly focused on valorizing the beautiful landscape of Flanders, valorizing like the folklore of Flemish culture and stuff like that. But at the end, like this alternative, exciting thing that used to make the greatness of the city is not there anymore. And it's something that you also see in more sectors. They have a big crisis in terms of economy as well, because the land is not attractive anymore. There's not like this tale that used to be told about the region and the city. And without this, well, you end up just having like festivals in the main square of the city where you drink beer and you sing folk music. You know, it's nice, but it's not as diverse as it used to be. And for a journalist, you end up like moving to another city to talk about other things. And I don't want to be fatalistic, but it's what happened for me. For example, like I moved from Antwerp to Brussels because in Brussels you still had, for example, like this as in France, the exception culturelle, you know, where you want to fund this. Of course, in some regions you have like the decrease of the fundings, but compared to other countries where we mentioned just here, I think we still have a pretty okay situation, but we still have to fight for it and to fight to maintain this situation.
But sorry, maybe what I would like to stress is that we shouldn't lose from sight the critical perspectives on arts and culture. Because within context of Slovakia, I perceive this tendency to idealize art and culture as being victim now. But it's not the case, it's not the wrong thing to do. Like, I've been working on arts and culture and I've been super critical about it, and I will still be. And I think this is the point, because I realized there are two fights to fight. One is against the Slovak National Party or the current leadership of Ministry of Culture, and another happens within the art scene itself, who to some extent refuses to problematize its elitist status, as you just said.
And actually, I feel that what you're saying about this elitist culture, I mean, culture seen as an elitist sphere, and what you're saying about as a journalist lacking subjects to write about, it's kind of this thing of funding and of ideology is a whole ecosystem, right? If there's no more culture to talk about and to go to and to, live, then as a journalist, you don't have anything to do anymore. And that's the same thing. That's kind of this, because I feel like in far-right countries, this thing about culture being an elitist activity or an elitist scene or domain, whatever, is kind of being nurtured, right? Like it's not culture for the people kind of thing. It's kind of a culture for some kind of group.
They've been using that for so many years, and it's mostly false. And it's mostly something, you said correctly, something that they use. Let's twist that. That's what we have to do right now, I feel. Because don't let them use this thing. And if there are some elitist part of our culture, of the things we like, tell it that it's not effective anymore. And it's dangerous now to run something that's not effective because we are in danger. I mean, the situation in Slovakia is dangerous. The situation in Italy might be dangerous. In Belgium might be dangerous. So we have to be wise. That's the point. So please do not follow the old narratives, because it was the old narratives that brought us to the situation that we're living now.
But maybe, let's just start to speak about our working condition. Yeah. And like that, everyone will see we are not elites at all. Let's speak about the precarization in arts and culture. Let's speak about our fees, which are not clear until the last moment, etc., etc. So maybe this is also the way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you want to have a cultural sector and a media cultural sector that is thriving, you have to build the whole kind of condition to make it thrive and to make it able to defend itself, right? And I feel like today, as in Slovakia with the Open Culture Platform, which is doing an incredible work of solidarity and commoning, let's say, it's kind of trying to make this condition, but by ourselves, which is a problem. It should be also a state dynamic to instate a better situation for cultural workers. And maybe something that we can touch on now is, because one of kind of the difficulty of stating this better condition and trying to make another narrative than the far right convey is visibility. We're talking about reach. Reach is very difficult when you're an independent journalist and independent cultural worker. So how do you keep your journalism going, or you keep your cultural work going in this context of kind of no visibility and kind of almost invisibility, right?
Networking, you have to unite. For instance, during the pandemics, all the workers of the live music sectors, obviously they were not allowed to work. So they started to talk about organizing themselves and creating sort of trade unions and networks and these and that. And that was cool. But suddenly when these started to roll again, that's all gone. So we need a process that starts from the bottom, that starts within us. Because if we are waiting for the institutions to do something good for us, we're going to wait a very, very long time.
Yeah, do you want to maybe touch on this visibility thing? Because with the open culture, you got a lot of visibility thanks to the petition, as you were saying, because it got a lot of signatures, but still it's kind of an everlasting work to keep visible, keep the things going. How do you feel that you're managing it?
It's sort of kamikaze feeling, because we've been doing this for 6 months at the expense of our health and relations and our spare time, etc. And you are able to do this for half a year, but we won't be able to do it 3 more years for free, because we are not at all paid, none of us, or even 7 more years if they win elections again. So the question of sustainability, I don't see it very positively, and I won't pretend. So let's see. But the very realistic option is that many people from the sphere of arts and culture will emigrate rather to a different country or to different profession.
Yeah. I think the question of visibility also, this problem that we have to solve, and one of the ways is also to diversify what you end up doing. I know that, for instance, as a journalist, I started out as a web journalist, really doing everything from my room and not really connecting that much with other ways of doing journalism. Now I started doing my own videos, and I'm here as well talking about it. We were talking about this before, but it's such a change in my way of doing journalism, and I think that this crisis made me adapt and made me develop more things to gain in terms of visibility. And another thing that I think is crucial, and somehow we end up having it here as well, is to develop more collaborations, and not only nationally but also internationally. Benefit from each other's knowledge, benefit from each other's feedback. Independent journalism doesn't mean that you're alone. It also means that you can connect with other independents that are doing the same thing and that are having the same problematics. And I think that in general, far right is trying to divide people. here what we're doing is uniting them. And I think that it's also a way to gain in terms of visibility. In general, like, I feel that the situation is a little bit different in terms of collaborations in France and in Belgium. I feel that in France, often you see the other as a competitor, while in Belgium you have way more this way of like grasping the opportunities of what the others bring to you. And I think that this kind of mindset should be a little bit more like the one that is motivating us, so we can move forward and resist this kind of dangers that we have in front.
Maybe, sorry, I would like to add something more positive after my last speech, that the visibility is one thing, but then there is also like structural support. And what we are getting very much is the support from lawyers, for instance, which is crucial for us. It's like top-level lawyers that we could never afford to pay, and they are working for us, consulting with us for free or for very little amounts of money. So this is a huge thing.
That's also, you were talking about collaboration. That's a great collaboration between the cultural scene and another scene, which is the legal one, and lawyers, for example. Actually, talking about this collaboration, and globally there's some more solidarity movement, which I think is kind of the key to fighting the far right. In the end, is kind of to find allies and to work together towards a better situation, working condition, better mental health condition within the cultural sphere. I think that the open culture platform and movement is right now the most current and best example of this solidarity movement. Maybe can you tell us a bit more about what has been going on in the last few weeks? Because I know that there's been a strike that has been launched in Slovakia, also a donation campaign that has been started as well, and demonstrations throughout the country, I think, last week. Can you tell a bit more about what's going on right now?
Yeah, I hope it won't be boring. It's not. It's all started in January, as I said, and with every new proposal of legislation changed, we organized campaigns and protests and wrote together with lawyers these collective comments and tried to do what we could. But it didn't work. Just it had no impact. The things got more intense in summer when Minister of Culture dismissed the director of National Theatre and National Gallery. So then it really reached even wider audiences, and there was a huge protest. But we thought, okay, like we see, and they said it clearly, you can protest, but it won't change a thing. So we knew that we must mobilize another institution. So at the beginning of September, we declared strike alert of cultural workers in Slovakia. Till now, there are 4,000 people involved from all over Slovakia, from different sort of institutions. But the thing that we are thinking, or one thing we need to reflect on very intensely, is what it means to strike in the sphere of culture, where we have completely different bargaining tools as workers in factories. Because if they don't start working, they produce direct economic loss to their employees. We don't have this capacity. We can have some media. We can create media pressure and cause some reputation damages, but that's all. So it's really a super important thing for us now to rethink what it means to organize strike in the sphere of arts and culture, where many of us are freelancers, so we don't even have employees. So this is something we are in the midst of now. And maybe an interesting thing to say is that 70 employees of Ministry of Culture itself joined the strike alert.
That's amazing. That's a good solidarity movement.
That's brave. That's brave.
It's really brave, yeah.
We should inspire, honestly, if it ever comes to this kind of situation here. And I think that's why it's great to hear the feedback from places where it's already happening, that we have this tool as well to leverage if it happens here as well.
And we have this example to strive for, And how, so you're saying that there are 4,000 cultural workers who have gone on strike. How are you, as a movement, sustaining themselves, helping themselves financially? Like, has the donation funds been working, or how has it been organized?
There is a fundraising campaign, but it's not big, I think. So we mostly use the resources to finance protests and hire techniques and stuff like that. So it's not big enough to sustain ourselves. We don't know, simply we don't know. So far we've been doing it just because we feel the need, but and we still have some capacities and energy left over, but rather there must be some new people joining and altering us at some point, or we will see.
Well, if you have the means to donate for open culture, because, help our fellows cultural workers in Slovakia to continue the strike. Another solidarity dynamic is, as I was saying, you're representing Sonwo, which is an independent media in Milan. And with Sonwo, you're part of the Reset network that I represent. How has this network dynamic helped you as an independent media in your fight to survive, basically?
I've learned a lot, which is so important. Just as I'm learning right today, listening to you. Networking is crucial, but it's not crucial helping you to get money now. That's the point. There's there's an amount of knowledge, of empathy that's really, really important when you get in touch with other people, which is not something that's life-changing right now. It's not gonna change the result of the game that's played today. But in the future, staying inside a network opens your eyes. This thing of the cultural strike is really interesting because the question is, what's the effect of a cultural strike? If a factory strikes, then there are no more cars. If the drivers of the public transportation strike, there are no more buses and trains or whatever, and people are affected. But we should tell that if there is no culture, if there are no cultural events, the quality of your life is shit. It's really in danger, is even worse than is it now. So it's not the economical damage. Let's try to sell the fact, which is actually true, it's not only about selling. Let's try to sell the fact that, once again, culture makes your life better. And if the culture world is striking, that means that your life could be even worse.
Yeah, but this is a long-term communication.
Definitely. But is there any short-term communication tool?
Well, we think of the fact that maybe in our case, stop working might not be the most visible and most important thing, just because of the dynamics I described before. So for me, the main output is really networking, and that people from the institutions run by Ministry of Culture are joining in and showing clearly that it's being decomposed from inside, that they are super incompetent in what they do. They don't use any data analytics. They just proclaim some measures without knowing what they want to achieve with them and stuff like that.
That's the key. They're not good at what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's crucial.
And in this dynamic of solidarity, you were talking about freelance, which is a big aspect of the cultural scene. Like, there are many, many cultural workers and journalists are freelance right now, which is kind of a barrier to this solidarity and collective movement, because you're already on your own working. You yourself, Matteo, you are a freelance journalist. Like, do you have, or are you a part of any collective movement or common movement that can you help you getting into this solidarity dynamics in this context of far-right rising?
Luckily, I diversify also the way I manage to fund my work. So what I tend to do is really to have a foot a little bit everywhere within the sector, of culture, of course, to not only get inspiration, but also get the funds to continue doing what I do. I used to be artistic director of a nightclub. I used to do communication for a contemporary dance company. I used to do all these different types of jobs. to be able to sustain myself, to keep doing the independent journalistic side of my persona. And I think that somehow, like at the end, it's also a matter of credibility, I believe. Like it helped me a lot understanding the behind the scenes, because if you don't have the contacts, if you don't have like the background, if you don't have the inside knowledge of what really is happening, you cannot really report about it the best way. And I think that that's the way that this network of solidarity and also this network in general of like cultural workers helped me to keep on being the journalist that I am today. To being able to not to infiltrate because it's not in a sneaky way, but to sweat with them, to be part of this, to not only being external but really taking part in what's happening and being affected as well by all the threats that both of you mentioned. So leaving it as close as the people that I'm talking about helped also like realizing and also like keeping the movement going.
But maybe exactly this experience of being a freelance worker enabled us within open culture to be working for free, like full-time job for half a year now. That's it.
Yeah, it's kind of good sides and bad sides, let's say. There's another aspect, I think, because yes, solidarity within cultural workers or in the same group is important, but one aspect that we haven't really touched on, you touched on a bit earlier to educate people, but one huge aspect is audiences. As an independent journalist, if you don't get through to your audiences and you don't convey the fact that, yes, we are independent and we are kind of in survival modes because we evolve in a country where the power is threatening, well, if you don't get this link with your audience, you cannot really continue to survive and continue to resist. So what is this dynamic with your audiences? Do you feel that there's a broken link, or do you think that things are actually going?
It's a tricky thing because you tend to think that the average audience is lazy, is stupid, and it's against the really interesting independent things. We do tend to think like this, or at least I do.
Very optimistic.
That's dangerous. If it's a democracy, the numbers are not the only answer, but the numbers count. So yes, sometimes you have the impression that a stupid pop singer gathers much more people than an excellent experimental electronic producer. That's it. That's part of the game. And you have to accept that. Try to steal some folks that think that it's much more entertaining to watch the pop star. Try to bring them to an event of yours, which is fun, because we've got fun events as well. Sometimes you really just indulge in the fact that you're clever and the majority is stupid. It might be true, but if you indulge in that, you're dead, because they're more than you. Their numbers are higher than yours. So you have to try. You have to try to like build some bridges between the mainstream and what you do. That's the answer. That's another form of networking. It's the dirtiest one probably because the pure networking is amazing and finding the right people with the right ideas. You need to do that, definitely. That's super important. But at the same time, even dirty networks could help in a way.
What do you think about the link with audiences and how you get through to people that are not like evolving within your own scene and not knowing your own fights?
I will develop on what you said by contradicting it. I will always fight hard for the radical equality of intelligences, as Jacques Rancière speaks about. He said in one interview, if I remember correctly, I will just paraphrase him, that to address public intellectuals means to address people who are stupid enough as to play the role of porte-parole of intelligentsia. And I could have this phrase tattooed somewhere to so much it's true. So for me, it's really, as I was trying to say, the important thing is to reframe our narrations and exactly this, dividing people into boring, average, backwarded, and something interesting and niche that we can reach. Like, I just don't see the things in this way.
No, for sure. But how do you navigate the link with your audience when people do tend to think like this and do tend to categorize and to polarize, as you were saying? Like, when you want to kind of go in front of this dynamic and kind of, change this dynamic, how do you do as a cultural worker to reach your audience to actually change this divided and dividings?
But this is the fight to be fought within the art community itself, not towards the audiences, I think.
What do you mean?
That to contradict this sort of elitist framing, the target group is the art scene itself, not the audiences. So I don't have a clear answer. I'm really trying hard to find it, but
Okay.
yeah, for me it's crucial within also the fight we are fighting right now, because if we want next elections to have different results, we must find the common language with people that for whom we don't speak understandable things, because they, as I said, freedom of expression, it's super important for us, and I don't contradict it. But for some people who wake up every morning at 4 a.m. to go to work and then back, it might not sound that important, and it's okay. So we must try to find different sort of building common language.
Which is similar to what I said, actually.
In which way?
Yeah, but that's exactly what I mean. It's like find this common language in this, because there is a part of responsibility within the arts and culture scene of not having built these bridges with the audiences and with people who might not be so interested in what we do. But how do we rebuild these common bridges and this common sense,
But for me, it's okay that some people are not interested in contemporary experimental arts. There is some contemporary arts that I find boring because it's just superficial.
No, the content itself for sure, but the fight that you are fighting must be something that should be understood by everyone. And even if you're not interested in contemporary art, for example, you should be able to feel for contemporary art workers who are struggling.
When I was speaking about this issue with my relatives who are really working class people from the small region in Slovakia, the only argument they were able to respond to was to say, okay, these people were doing their job right, the workers stand behind them, but Minister of Culture does dismiss them from one day to another, and without giving them any reason for that. So this is sort of argumentations that they can relate to, because it's connected to labor.
Yeah. So maybe finding parallels to show that similar situation are happening in other kind of sphere, and so kind of let's fight together because we're living the same harsh reality of being let down from one day to another. How do you feel that reaching audiences is maybe helping independent media, independent journalists to better fight this fight?
I think that what I try to do personally is to operate a change of scale, try to really refocus on a smaller community, but a one that will be more engaged in what you do, and somehow organically it will spread a bit better about your own productions. But what I tend to do is really to consider my audience as one that will have something to say about what I write. And this is something that I try to motivate as much as possible, to ask for feedback, to ask for comments, to ask to share, to ask to I cannot count anymore the amount of articles that I wrote thanks to someone answering to an article of mine online, And I think that this is also something that I try to stress as much as possible by talking here, but by talking also to other people that are part of the audience. I am also part of the audience of someone at the end, and I think that the more people will be involved in very local stuff as well, there will be a bigger reach, and then more visibility, and then more involvement, and then the support will grow. Something that I've been noticing more and more when we talk about independent journalism that also touches very deep and very important subjects that are political is that you see more and more people that are part of the audience and that they are bringing as well their knowledge and their like tools to amplify your message. Like how many times I have worked with people that are, for example, graphic designers, and they were only considered as audience before, and now they are like partners, in that they end up being involved even more. Or artists that read about a piece that I did that inspired them, something like a concert or a party or a concept that will go beyond only the text to create more interaction, more engagement. And then at the end, that's how you end up building your own little society, your little community. And I think that by having first an impact on your closest community and your smaller community, at the end, it goes as a cascade and it goes again like in a bigger stream. And then you can hope changing the bigger perspective, the bigger picture. I think like if you start thinking more local and more like small actions, you will end up having better and bigger results. Of course, like if it's urgent, your situation, and that you're striking, for example, or you're lacking the solution to find fundings and stuff like that, it's of course taking more time and it's more difficult to solve this question, but it's something to develop and it takes time, unfortunately.
Baby steps, basically.
Steps.
Yeah. So yeah, basically support your local cultural media, and it will help this media to like develop its reach and maybe get solidarity dynamics with from other local media from another locality, etc. Yeah. Well, I guess that we have seen kind of different stages of evolving into far-right societies with the three of you guys.
And that is great.
That's great.
It's definitely
That's
great.
learning a lesson and kind of maybe learning from another example, which is helping to also lead this collective fight. Because I do believe that even if you're evolving within, you aren't in Italy, you aren't in Slovakia, or you aren't in Belgium, the idea is to also kind of, stick together and lead this collective fight and helping the way we can, but kind of going to each other and ask for help is also really interesting. Well, I guess that we're gonna give the mic to the audience if you have any questions, because it's the time for questions. Yeah. I think that, yeah, it's okay. Cool.
Hi. So my question is about this phenomenon that is not so new, that has been going on with media, so independent medias that make artists, labels pay for articles, which for me, like, is a bit of an issue, because then, like, we were talking about far-right ideas, and it will, like, not be helping to put emerging artists forward. And I just want to know, how do you feel about it? In the medias you work for, do they use this type of strategies? Because for me, it's really like a pain in the ass, and that's not helping to have a more like varied scene overall in whatever areas. Thank you.
You're damn right. 100% right. I've been offered so many times to get some money for reviews, for articles, interviews. It would help because I'm not making that much money out of my website, out of Soundwall. I have other resources, luckily enough, just as Matteo. So it would be tempting to accept these 50 euros, 100 euros. Let's say you make 300 euros a month, 400 euros. That's already something instead of zero. But I do not accept that, because I do feel what you said is 100% important. It's a pain in the ass, and it's really ruining our critical approach. So sometimes it's more important to say no to an offer of 50 euros to write a review than to write 10 texts about how stupid Giorgia Meloni is in Italy. You have to start from the fundings, and this thing where the review gets something paid, that's part of the fundings. And one of the reasons why the media are in crisis and they are in crisis is because they, at a certain point, trying to survive, they accepted this. It's normal. Even the major media outlets, I don't know, Vanity Fair, which is one of the biggest magazines in Italy, weekly magazine. I think that right now, out of 150 pages, probably the 80% is paid content, even if it's not written. Because it's not a direct ad, sometimes you make an interview just because the brand that endorses that artist or that sport athlete has allowed you to do that interview. And that's dangerous. That's really poisoning everything. So yes, I feel that you enlightened a very crucial point. Thanks for that.
I have the same opinion. Unfortunately, we're also talking about financing journalism in general, and I know that it happened to me to write this kind of articles when I was working for an outlet that was basically like surviving thanks to this money. But what's always very interesting is that if I would show my friends or my partner, like, okay, this is an article that I did myself, and this is an article that was ordered by someone and paid for. The second one is shit, honestly. Like, and what's nice is that often they're happy to be delivered shit. You know, they just want their name to be published. They don't just want someone to write about their thing. And I don't even call it journalism at the end. I call it as it's an order. Someone orders this from you, and you end up delivering. And unfortunately, like, since you don't have that many resources to survive, you have to accept it. But I wouldn't even put it in the same category. Like in Vanity Fair, unfortunately, it's in the same pages. But for me, for example, like, it's not in my book. It wasn't even published in the same web page. It's really something like to write words for me, you know, and even myself, I wouldn't even like put my soul into the writing, you know. So it's sad that it has to exist because there's no other ways to do so. But I wouldn't even consider it like really like writing.
Sorry. Remember that a review today, it's not making a difference. So if you're a musician and if you invest 50 euros or 100 euros to have written reviews, that's money that you're wasting. So do something else.
You wanted to say something?
Just a small note that the audiences of the independent media I usually write for are already so limited that to put there another obstacles like paywalls is really absurd thing to do.
Exactly. And thank you for your question. Any other question? Yeah.
It's not so much a question as more contribution to talk about the French cultural situation. It's not even about music, but so I work for a Giant Puppets street theater company that exists since 25 years. And so we were born at a time where popular arts were trying to change the world based on participative creation. So creating with people, for people, building collective projects. So for example, giant puppets that can go up to 4 meters high, building the construction, the clothes, the wig on the puppets, writing the show with people, then playing the show in the streets. How do you use the public space to bring culture to people and to offer free shows, free theater, music, dancing in the streets, all of that. And it's essentially based on public funding. So right now, the whole public funding is going downhill. There's a whole drop also for from the programs. Festivals don't have the money. The cities have less money to book the shows for the people in the streets, everything like that. And companies are, well, they're closing. It's it feels like it's the end of an era. And, also workshops, bringing people, because you want to create with people for people. But if the workshops don't bring people anymore because people are on their iPad at home, or they're not interested anymore, or they're not touched by what you're trying to do, then it doesn't have any sense anymore. And also with the Olympic Games, a lot of public fundings was directly used for the passage of the flame, the Olympic flame, and there was banks and sponsorships, and you were saying, oh, we're doing this event for the people of the neighborhood, and it was just wasteful, and so much money that just went towards also very specific area around Paris and all of that. And so I don't know if I have a question about that, but I just wanted to share and also the administrative pressure and all the projects, and there's less and less money to pay the artists, and we're just, drowning in files and paperwork, and it's very hard.
Yeah, thank you for your for sharing. It brings a lot to what we're saying, and it's actually really interesting to hear from one specific, your specific sector that is kind of telling for the rest of the sector. Right? You wanted to react, Jan?
Yeah, something I wanted to say about this is that I will always be extra thankful and admirative of the people who still manage, even though with all these cuts and all these situations, to keep on making people believe and making people dream. We've been talking about this cultural sector that is in crisis, but yet I see so many events still happening, so many people that are still standing, and even though they're making way less money than they used to do, they are still doing it. And it's something that makes me believe that even though it's a crisis, there might be something coming after, because people will still produce, they will still do, even if it's illegal, even if it's underground, even if it's pay what you can events. They want to give the people the possibility to still believe and to still have joy, as you were saying. Culture brings this kind of joy, and I'm happy that it still exists, and that's why we also. It happened to me many times also to write articles for free, because you're not going to ask 50 euros to someone that will not even make 50 euros. So I think that even as an activist gesture, I'm happy that this is still happening.
Yeah, it's a collective utopia, and but also it's hard to keep faith in the popular arts if you feel that it's not meaningful for the population. So it's a bit, but we're gonna keep fighting. And
if you feel that's not meaningful for the population, then you've got a problem. If you do something, believe in that. Because if you believe in what you do, a part of the audience will start to believe as well. If you're not believing in what you do, if you're doing just because for the sake of it, it's not going to work.
It's getting people there the hardest, because when people are outside and, participating, it's always a magical moment, but people are locked up, and after COVID, it feels like people have very much locked themselves up and stopped the collective experiences that they might hold.
Maybe we should try to work harder to find a new language. Maybe that's the point. Maybe. I don't know. But sometimes it's really a matter of a new language. It's a matter of form, in a way. But always remember to be meaningful to yourself and to the people you're talking with and you're speaking to. Because if you feel that you're not meaningful anymore, okay, it's time to stop and to rethink what you were doing.
True. But I feel that sometimes feeling this meaning, and as you were saying, kind of feeling that is useless or meaningless, it's hard when, as you were saying, the priority from the public funding or from the public authorities, it's not put on you. When you see that sometimes the budgets for culture is the same, but it's just distributed in another way that, for example, popular form of arts don't get any funding anymore, because you feel like you're not the priority anymore, right? And it's kind of keeping this meaning where you don't feel you're a priority can be hard. But I do believe that it's, as Ivana was saying before, it's building this new language and finding a common language that make both your audience, yourself, and your coworkers having this meaning.
But also organize, unionize, and
Exactly.
you can come up with a system of fair minimum wages. It's not you, it's capitalism.
We're lucky in France, though. We do have a lot to surround how people get paid.
It's true. And it's very important for sure. Thank you. Well, if there are no other question or intervention, go for it. You can have another question.
Thanks. I hope it's not a too broad a question. My idea is that when I hear you talking, the main effect of the far right being in a position of power is cutting the funding. It looks like it. I'm not, maybe it's I'm overreaching, but it looks like a bit like it. So it's like some sort of very local thing that they do. It's not like systemic of some sort. The systemic part would be what Miss talked about, which was more of a smaller culture fighting against bigger systems, which are like more economically efficient, and also which kind of drain, well, the funding left over, also the interest of people. We were talking about iPads, so it's easier to just lay in bed on your iPad instead of going to something interesting. And also bigger cultural producers, have become better and better at assimilating counterculture and smaller cultural forms of expression. What are your thoughts about it, if it's not too broad?
Who wants to go for it?
I'm not sure if I understand the question. Or
I'm sorry. I was basically what are the scales? Is the far right impact on independent journalism and let's say the cultural scene that big compared to the more systemic mainstream culture and what it does in terms of redirecting fundings, redirecting attention, redirecting this kind of thing? So is it clear?
Would it be basically, is the biggest impact from the far-right government or from the capitalistic organization of culture?
Yeah, maybe a bit too broad a question.
Which one of the monster is the worst?
Both. It's always both in
and one is working for the others.
One is the dog of the other.
in different percentages for sure, but it's usually both. But it's hard to imagine a world without capitalism right now. Quoting Mark Fisher, it's a trap. Yes, it is. But other systems might be even worse. So yeah, it's definitely both. It's not one thing or the other.
In case of Slovak Nationalist Party, it's a huge scam they are doing because they are speaking all the time about the strong hand of the state. But when it comes to their responsibility, they start to speak about free hand of the market. So at some points, they proclaim to be on the side of the workers class, etc., etc. But in fact, they are defending the interests of oligarchs. So we need to find the language of how to communicate this scam to their voters.
So it's exactly the mix of it.
Together. So it's not like not two different things. It's basically they are in the same boat together, fighting against diverse cultural expression.
Like the general secretary named his main enemy as being neo-Marxist, feminist, liberal, queer propaganda.
I think we're gonna come to an end now. Thank you for the one who are still here. Thank you for being here. Thank you three for coming and for sharing your experience and thoughts. And for the one that's still here, do follow the Open Culture platform to support Slovakia movement. Do follow Matteo and his work. Do follow Soundwall. Do follow Reset as well. And enjoy the rest of your afternoons.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.